There's a lack of compassion shown to people who are vulnerable, and I know sort of that it's been raised this morning that the elderly do seem to sort of be on the tail end of that more than anybody else, but actually it does happen to other people as well who aren't elderly, and we've been dealing with a case recently of a 46-year-old man, which is an absolutely horrendous case. So, whilst it is mainly elderly people that do suffer, it can happen to anybody as well. And I think the thing that shocks me more than anything is the way the sort of attitudes towards older people in general by health professionals, and the attitude that they're a drain on the service. Older people aren't a drain on the service. They pay their dues the same as everybody else. They're just cashing in their chips when they need it most. So, that isn't an appropriate attitude to take towards older people at all. From my personal experience as well, the thing that concerned me the most was the lack of communication. There's a huge lack in communication skills with nurses, and we actually tried to address that by creating a training programme, which we successfully been running in Wales. But it's not just a case of the communication between the patient, relatives and carers, it's actually the communication between the various professionals within the organisation, and that I think is why so many of these problems actually happen, which isn't helping at all. Right, and where am I now? Right, okay. There's also concern about the attitudes and behaviour of staff towards one another. Bullying in the NHS seems to be rife, and people working in the NHS are fearful of speaking up about things that aren't right because of the fear of being ostracised. Sidelined career-wise or forced out of their jobs, and there's been the really high-profile case recently that I'm sure you've all heard of Margaret Haywood, the nurse who was struck off and then reinstated. A dignified revolution was so incensed by that decision by the Nursing and Midwifery Council that when the Royal College of Nursing put out the petition, we sent it around our network and said, please pass this on and get people to sign it. It's done absolutely nothing to help those nurses that want to speak out. They're just going to find it even more difficult, really. And of course, we can't forget all the external factors that impact on nursing and nurses. Hang on a minute, government policy, league tables, budgets and finance, as we all know, have a huge impact on the care that's delivered. Staffing levels play a huge role in the quality of care that's delivered, and as I've already mentioned, there's a danger of replacing skilled nurses with unqualified staff to save money. But I don't think we can always blame the sort of environmental factors on what happens. I think that contributes to it, but it's not always the case that people use that as an excuse. There is a view that there's a lack of nurse leadership and accountability both within hospitals and within organisations external to the hospitals. By that I mean universities and regulatory bodies. Nursing and Midwifery Council has the role of protecting patients and the public by making sure that nurses are registered and comply with their code of practice. Nursing and Midwifery Councils have problems of its own in recent years, with accusations of racial bullying and poor governance. It's still trying to regain its reputation, and it's still failing to protect patients and public. And we have been to some recent Nursing and Midwifery Council meetings, which we've been actually been shocked at the ignorance of the staff who are presenting information to us. And we actually met with the chair of the Nursing and Midwifery Council last week in Cardiff, and I emailed before the meeting to his secretary and said, you please need to make sure we have 2 hours to speak to him because we've got such a long list of issues. We had the 2-hour meeting, and we're meeting with them again in a few weeks' time, because at the end of the meeting we still haven't covered human rights, and we have a particular issue about human rights, so we'll be meeting with them again in the near future. So those are some of the facts, and I'm sure there's probably lots more as well that impact on nurses and nursing itself. So what can we do about it? How can we get nursing back on track? Well, I strongly believe that if nurses are passionate about their profession, they need to get the public sector on their side. There's a huge raft of general public who know what's happening in the NHS, like yourselves, who are really keen to make things right. And instead of giving everybody arm's length, why not just embrace it and listen and learn, is what I would say. Patients and publics have the first-hand experience of how services are delivered. They're on the receiving end. They know what's working and what's not. And quite often, they're not being arrogant or aggressive in voicing their concerns. They just generally want to sort of flag up something that's not right, and quite often get a very defensive attitude thrown back at them, and then the class is being a nuisance and what have you. I think they really need to sort of make some efforts and get this going. And actually meaningfully involve people in things. There's no reason why general public can't be trained to do staff recruitment, staff induction. I know professional concern do sensory audits on the ward, and they've been doing aseptic technique assessments and stuff. It's not rocket science, you know, but they know